While many are enjoying their lives, going to work, coming home, spending time with family, spending time with wife, spending time with children, reading children books, listening to music, others playing video games, others communicating with friends on their phones, others thinking about when the next time they're going to get high, others browsing through YouTube, browsing through Facebook, browsing through Instagram, browsing through Snapchat, others watching pornography, some smoking weed, others testing high drugs. You get the idea. While all of this is taking place and many people are in that state of distraction, in that state of delusion, that this is reality, repeating the same vicious cycle over and over and over again. Little do they know that a time of distress is upon them, and they are watching pornography to their doom, listening to music to their doom, entertaining Facebook to their doom, enjoying watching movies for their doom, playing video games while their doom approaches. Let this video be a wake-up call for you. You see, the Lord will not allow distress. He will not allow a crisis. He will not allow a tribulation to befall upon you without giving you a warning. The reason I'm saying this is because the same thing which I am about to show you right now happened also in the past. Jesus Christ gave the prophecy. He prophesied of the doom that awaited ancient Jerusalem. The Christians were told ahead of time, and they did their part to warn the people who were in Jerusalem. They were told that a time of distress was coming. They were told that a time of famine was coming. They were told that a time of great tribulation was coming upon Jerusalem. They were told that destruction was coming upon Jerusalem. And in fact, even the destruction did not come upon them unawares, because the Lord allowed a sign for His people to see that, hey, it's time for you to get out of the city. You see, many were called, but few were chosen. And that's because only a few people escaped Jerusalem. Hold on to your seatbelts, because this is going to reveal to you what is coming to the land of the United States of America, because there is a forecast in Midwest America that they are going to be experiencing a famine. Not just this alone. If you go to Australia, if you go to any other parts of the world, even the developed nations, these nations are now forecasting a time of great famine and a time of great trouble. Perilous times are here, and I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to give you the heads up note that Jesus is coming. But before Jesus comes, many trials and tribulations are going to arise. Things are going to get so bad that the nation is going to be turned into a zombie-like nation. And I don't mean literal zombies. What do I mean? Well, stay tuned. Let's go and visit ancient Jerusalem, because history repeats itself. As many of you should know by now, ancient Jerusalem was under siege by the Roman Empire. However, before Jerusalem became under siege in 70 AD, there was a precursor of an event which forecasted a siege or an attack by the Roman Empire against Jerusalem. And that event happened in the fall of 66 AD, in which Cestus, between October and November of 66 AD, the fall of that year, he attempted to go and attack Jerusalem, but was quickly defeated, and within 5 days he had to withdraw back and retreat. He was humiliated, and that humiliation affected the entire Roman Empire. The world superpower of the then known world was humiliated, and they were not going to allow this humiliation to continue to eat them up in their minds. Many people who were in Jerusalem, they have just witnessed an attack by the Roman hierarchy. And instead of them preparing themselves and taking off, many people decided to remain. And what did they start doing? They continued doing business as usual. Little did they know that the prophecy which Jesus Christ the Messiah had predicted was coming to a fulfillment. And as he went out of the temple, one of his disciples saith unto him, Master, see what manner of stones and what buildings are here. And Jesus answering said unto him, Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, over against the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew asked him privately, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign when all these things shall be fulfilled? You see, in Mark 13, the disciples seem to be asking about when will the end of these things be? When will these things come to a fulfillment in which the temple shall be destroyed and these buildings shall be brought down to rubbles? But when we go to Matthew 24, the question which they ask is also clarified. Here is what it says. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? You see, that gives the clarification that the disciples were curious. Tell us, Master, when will these things be? When will the temples be destroyed as you have just spoken? Not just this, but tell us when will be the sign, or what will be the sign of your coming, so that we can be fully aware. So there were two questions. Tell us of the destruction of Jerusalem, and also tell us of the end of the world, the events that will precede your second coming. And furthermore, in Matthew 24, Jesus goes on gives the warning for the disciples and for his believers, for anyone who will hear this warning, that they should flee into the mountains. And he said, Woe unto the mothers, woe unto them that have nursing babies in those days. When tribulation comes, those who are not grounded in Christ, woe unto them. Woe unto the mothers who are giving suck in those days in times of tribulation. Woe unto them so long as they do not have Jesus Christ in their hearts. Why? It's because when the destruction of Jerusalem came in 70 AD, something dreadful happened. And this event was so great that the mothers began to turn to their own infant children for meat. They began to eat their own children. You see, they received a precursor of a Roman attack. Those who believed in the words of Jesus Christ, when they saw the sign that the Romans came in 66 AD, they took off, they fled into the mountains. But those who were unrepented, those who were unbelievers, those who did not take heed of the warning of Jesus Christ the Messiah, after the failed attempt of the Romans in the fall of 66 AD, they went back to doing business as usual. If the Jews had taken this seriously, they would not have lost millions of lives. Millions of people would not have died. However, they did not heed the warning of the Messiah. And as a direct result, when they went back to doing business as usual, little did they know that when they were dancing to their own doom. When they were eating and drinking, they were eating and drinking to their own demise. Little did they know that 3.5 years later, Jerusalem would be encompassed by the Roman army. And so it happened. In the spring of 70 AD, Jerusalem became under siege by the Romans. They became surrounded and encompassed by the Roman army. As a direct result, the gates of the city were closed, which meant that no one could go in and no one could come out. It also meant that no food was being shipped in and no food was being shipped out. This also meant that the investors could no longer go out of their way to make investments in any properties, neither could they even make any trade deals at all with any other nations, which ultimately meant that Jerusalem was in a state of an economic crisis. The economy had collapsed. Does that ring a bell for you? Let that sink in. As a direct result of the collapse of the economy, people became violent towards one another. The neighbors which once smiled and said good morning, good evening, good afternoon, have a great day, all the smiles turned into frowns. The mothers began to turn upon their own children and they began to eat their own children. They diced them up and they began to boil them, and they would take turns. One mother would say, today we will eat your child and tomorrow we will eat my child. They actually began to speak this, and these are things that are documented in the Bible. Now I'm going to direct your attention to look at this new ad of a new clothing line, which should scare you, because this is how they are conditioning your minds. And those people who behold these things, if you even entertain wearing these things, that is going to mess you up. I thought those other unisex ones that they're coming up with were pretty messed up, but this, I believe this one is beyond messed up, because now they are making you look at fellow human beings as walking meat. This is demonic. It's beyond demonic. This is evil. These designs should be burned and cast away. However, we know for a fact that based upon the times that we are living in, these things are going to be promoted. You're being turned into a cannibal. There is nothing new under the sun. History repeats itself. Starvation is coming upon the land. Famine is coming upon the land. All of your earthly supports are going to be taken away from you, are all going to be cut off. Those who are not right with the Lord, those who do not have Jesus Christ in their hearts, they are going to do whatever it takes to eat. You guys are smart enough. You know exactly what I'm talking about. What's very interesting is even the secular world is telling us that there is an economic crisis that is coming. Something is about to happen. Observe the following news headlines. This article states, we are due a recession in 2020 and we will lack the tools to fight it. Conditions will soon be ripe for a financial crisis, but governments will have their hands tied. You see, there's two things to look out for. One, economic. Two, political. While the economy is collapsing, the government is still trying to fix things politically. That means that there is something that is going to affect the political structures of government, in which possibly a civil unrest or a civil crisis will erupt, and that would keep the government's hands tied. And while the government is still trying to get that under control, the economy collapses. Now, I'm not saying that this is 100% true, but this is just an idea to let you know as to what the secular world is telling us. On the second paragraph, it says the current global expansion will likely continue into next year, given that the US is running large fiscal deficits. China is pursuing loose fiscal and credit policies, and Europe remains on a recovery path. But by 2020, the conditions will be ripe for a financial crisis, followed by a global recession. Sounds like doom and gloom. What they are simply forecasting, this is again, the secular world is forecasting a not so bright financial future. Now observe, former UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown spoke the following warning. Headline reads, "The world is sleeping into a financial crisis." In a BBC report, here's what he says. First of all, the headline reads the following: Gordon Brown in dire warning about the next financial crisis. He said, and I quote, "I feel we're sleeping into the next crisis," said Mr. Brown, speaking on the 10th anniversary of the start of the previous crisis. Now, if you look at these other headlines which I'm showing you, I'm not even going to read them, but you can clearly see that from the secular worldview, we can clearly see that everybody is pointing to a possible economic crisis. And it's not even that it might come. It's not if it comes. It's a matter of when the next crisis will come. And when the next economic crisis comes, it is finished, because this is the one that everyone is pointing to as being the big one. This is the big bubble, and it says that this will lead the world into a state that cannot even be compared to the Great Depression of the late 1920s and early 1930s. And here, as you can see in this article, they're comparing it back to the Great Depression. It says, headline, "The Catastrophe If Another Global Financial Crisis Strikes." And other secular news outlets are saying also that you should start preparing for the next economic collapse. Here's the headline: "Start preparing for the next financial crisis now." That's what it's saying. It sounds like doom and gloom. It sounds like a scary thing. However, all of these things, ladies and gentlemen, are just pointing out to the signs of the times that we're living in right now. But the current markets have to go. The current system of finance has to go. The current system of monetary funds has to go in order to make way for the biometrics. The biometric future is here. The age of microchips, the age of smart grid lines, the age of smart homes. All of these things are now going cashless. There's no more such thing as cash. They're trying to eliminate it. And in order to enter into the age of the biometric future, the current system, the current model, the current economic system must be erased. It must be gone. And only those who partake in receiving these biometrics and welcome these things, only they will be able to eat, and only they will be able to continue doing business as usual. Now, many people are going to be in direct rebellion of this system. What do you think that's going to cause? It's going to cause a civil crisis, a civil unrest. And this is going to stir the political structures of government, which ultimately means that this is the time when we are going to be witnessing the collapse of governments. The governments are going to ultimately have to use military rule and military force to restore order back once again. And that is going to call for a martial law. So the long-spoken talk of a martial law is highly going to be tied in to a crisis that either precedes the financial crisis or the economic collapse, or it will be that which precedes the economic collapse. How it's going to happen, how the pattern of events are going to happen, we don't know. I don't know. Here is all that you need to know. All you need to know is that if you are not right with the Lord now, if you do not make peace now, and you do not make things right now, you are going to have a beast-like mindset, or a beast mentality, in which you are going to just say, I gotta eat, I gotta survive, I gotta do what I gotta do to live. And ultimately, friends are going to betray one another. Family is going to betray one another. Brothers shall betray one another. Parents against children, and children against parents. And when the economy collapses, food cannot be brought into the cities. Food cannot be shipped out of the cities, which ultimately means that people are going to get hungry. And when you look at the forecast of the famine that is coming to the land of America and all other parts of the world, people are starving all over the world. And when you look at all of these events, like the migrant crisis that's taking place both in Europe and also in America, all of these things are leading to one crucial tipping point, and that is a major crisis, a major catastrophic event. These things, my friends, you cannot avoid these things. You can't just ignore it and say, no, this is foolish talk. No. If you say this is foolish talk and that tomorrow all things continue the same as they were from the very beginning, you shall perish. And you are going to turn against your brothers. You're going to turn against your own family. People are going to turn on one another, thus repeating world history. In ancient Jerusalem, the mothers ate their own children and people began to cannibalize on one another. And then what ended up happening? They all perished. And in this day and age, history will repeat once again. And those who don't know history or don't pay attention to history are doomed to repeat it. Those who are not grounded in Jesus Christ are going to be in trouble. Woe unto those who do not have the Lord with them. Those who do not have the character of Christ, they will become beasts, and there are going to be many of them. Those that have Jesus Christ would have gained victory over their appetites. They would have gained victory over their anger. They would have gained victory over self-control. They would have patience, and they would not become beasts. They would not go to the extremes of how others will go to the extreme of having that mindset of survival of the fittest. So now is the time to make peace and to make things right with the Lord. Now is the time to confess all of our sins and to make things right with the Lord, because only He will be able to keep us alive, and He will be the one to be our main provider, and He will be the one to keep us safe in these last days. If there's any ark that you want to run to the arms of Jesus Christ before the close of probation, before the angel of mercy ascends back into heaven, before the Holy Spirit of God is withdrawn from the earth. Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Controversy 7. Thank you for tuning in and for joining me. You take good care of yourselves. If you haven't already subscribed, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notification. I'm not going to hold you up. Thank you for tuning in and for joining me. You take care of yourselves, be safe, and I'll see you guys next time.